I've always been the kind of person who dreams big but plans carefully. Growing up in a small town outside Chicago, I watched my mom stretch every dollar to make ends meet after Dad left. She taught me that if you really want something, you save for it, you wait for it, and you treasure it when you finally get it. That's exactly what I did with my wedding dress. For 2 years, I worked extra shifts at the medical office where I'm a receptionist. Every Friday, I'd put $20 or $30 into an envelope I kept hidden in my dresser drawer. Sarah, my best friend since high school, thought I was crazy. "Just get something nice from David's Bridal," she'd say. But I had this image in my head, walking down the aisle in something that felt like it was made just for me, something that would make that moment perfect. When I finally had enough saved up, I drove to a boutique in downtown Chicago that I'd been eyeing for months. The moment I saw it hanging there, I knew. It was an ivory silk gown with hand-stitched beading along the bodice, delicate lace sleeves, and a train that flowed like water. The price tag read $10,000, which was exactly what I had saved. It felt like fate. The fitting process took 3 months. Every Saturday, I'd drive the hour into the city for adjustments. Mrs. Chen, the seamstress, would pin and tuck until it fit like a second skin. She told me stories about all the brides she'd dressed over the years while she worked. "This dress," she said one afternoon, stepping back to admire her work, "it was made for you." I almost cried right there in the fitting room. I brought it home on a rainy Tuesday in October, 6 months before the wedding. I hung it in the spare bedroom closet, wrapped in its special garment bag with little sachets of lavender to keep it fresh. Only my mom, Sarah, and my fiancé, Mike, knew I had it. I wanted it to be a surprise for everyone else. Mike's family had been nothing but welcoming since we got engaged 2 years ago. His parents, Bob and Linda, treated me like their own daughter. His younger brother, Danny, was like the sibling I never had. But then there was Marla, Mike's sister. She was 32, 3 years older than me, and had been married to her husband Carl for 8 years. They'd been trying to have kids for a while, and I could tell it was wearing on her. She had this way of making comments that stung, but were hard to call out directly. "Must be nice to be so young and carefree," she'd say. Or, "I remember when I could eat whatever I wanted to." I tried to include her in wedding planning. I asked her to help pick flowers, invited her dress shopping for bridesmaid dresses, even asked if she wanted to help with the centerpieces. She usually said she was too busy or just gave me a tight smile and changed the subject. Mike said she'd always been moody, especially since the fertility struggles started. I felt bad for her, so I kept trying. The weekend everything changed was supposed to be special. Linda had suggested having the whole family over for dinner to celebrate our engagement party invitations going out. It was a beautiful Saturday in March, warm enough to have the windows open. Linda made her famous pot roast, and we all sat around their dining room table, laughing and planning. After dinner, I went to help Linda with the dishes while the men watched basketball in the living room. Marla said she needed to use the bathroom upstairs. I didn't think anything of it. About 20 minutes later, I realized I'd left my purse upstairs and needed my lip balm. The sight that greeted me when I reached the top of the stairs will be burned in my memory forever. My bedroom door was wide open, and there was Marla, standing in front of my full-length mirror, wearing my wedding dress. She was struggling with the zipper, pulling and tugging at the delicate fabric. The dress, which fit me perfectly, was stretched tight across her larger frame. I stood there frozen, watching in horror as she yanked at the zipper. The beautiful beadwork was straining, and I could see the seams pulling. "Marla," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She spun around, her face flushed with embarrassment, and something else I couldn't quite identify. That's when I heard it. A loud, sickening rip. The sound seemed to echo in the quiet room. The back of the dress had torn open from the stress, and several of the hand-sewn beads scattered across my hardwood floor like tears. The delicate lace near the waist had split completely. Marla's eyes went wide. She looked like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar, except this wasn't a cookie. This was 2 years of my life, my dreams, my future wedding day, lying in tatters around her. "Oh God," she whispered, trying to hold the torn fabric together. "I'm so sorry, I wanted to see what it felt like, to feel like a bride again." I took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice calm. "Why didn't you ask me?" I said quietly. "If you'd wanted to see it, I would have shown you." She stepped out of the dress carefully, leaving it in a heap on my floor. "I didn't think you'd let me try it on," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I just wanted to feel beautiful for a minute." I knelt down and gathered the torn silk in my arms, feeling the weight of it, seeing the damage up close. Months of careful alterations, ruined. The train had a footprint on it. Beads were missing from the bodice. The delicate French seams Mrs. Chen had spent hours perfecting were split open. "Marla," I said, still kneeling on the floor with my destroyed dress, "this isn't about trying it on. This is about going into my room without permission and touching something that wasn't yours to touch." But she was already backing toward the door, tears in her eyes. "I said I was sorry," she said defensively. "It was an accident. An accident." As if she'd accidentally walked into my room, accidentally put on my dress, accidentally destroyed it. I spent the rest of that evening in my room, holding my torn dress and trying to make sense of what had happened. Downstairs, I could hear the family continuing their evening like nothing had changed. Linda was serving her apple pie, Bob was telling one of his work stories, and Mike was laughing at something Danny said. The normalcy of it all felt surreal when my entire wedding vision had just been shattered upstairs. Around 10 o'clock, after everyone had gone home except Marla and Carl, I decided I needed to talk to her. I'd had a few hours to process, and I knew that if I let this fester, it would poison our relationship forever. Despite what had happened, I still wanted to believe this could be fixed. She was going to be my sister-in-law. We'd be family for the rest of our lives. I found her in the kitchen, helping Linda wrap up leftovers. When she saw me coming, she immediately looked away and busied herself with aluminum foil. I asked if we could talk privately, and she reluctantly followed me out to the back porch. The March air was cool, and we could hear the neighbor's dog barking in the distance. I sat down on the porch swing that Mike had installed last summer, patting the space next to me. Marla remained standing, arms crossed, looking like she was preparing for battle. "Look," I started, trying to keep my voice gentle. "I know weddings can bring up a lot of feelings. I understand that watching other people get married might be hard when you're going through what you and Carl are going through." She shot me a look that could have frozen Lake Michigan. "Dawn about our personal life," she said sharply. I held up my hands. "I'm not trying to pry. I'm just saying I get it. If seeing my dress made you feel something, or if you felt left out of the planning, I wish you'd just talk to me. I would have understood." The words came out carefully, like I was diffusing a bomb. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head upstairs, trying to find the right way to express my hurt without making her feel worse. I explained how much the dress meant to me, not just because of the money, but because of what it represented. All those extra shifts, all those Saturdays driving to the city, all those dreams of walking down the aisle feeling like the best version of myself. It was never about— I paused, choosing my words carefully. It was never about whether the dress fit you or not. It was about boundaries, about trust, about asking before taking something that belongs to someone else. That's when everything went sideways. Marla's face changed completely. The guilty, embarrassed expression vanished, replaced by something hard and angry. "So now you're body-shaming me?" she said, her voice rising. "Is that what this is about? That I'm too fat for your precious dress?" I was stunned. "What? No, that's not—" "You made me feel like a freak in there," she continued, talking over me. Standing there looking at me like I was some kind of monster who didn't deserve to wear something beautiful. Do you know how that felt? My heart started racing. This wasn't at all how I'd imagined this conversation going. "Marla, please, that's not what I meant. I never said anything about your size. I'm upset because the dress is torn, not because I tore it," she finished. "Because I'm too big and I stretched it and ruined your perfect little fairy tale." I could feel tears starting to burn behind my eyes. "That's not fair. You're putting words in my mouth that I never said." But she was already shaking her head, backing away from me. "I can't believe I thought you were different. I thought maybe you actually cared about family, but you're just like everyone else. All you care about is your stuff, your perfect wedding, your perfect life. Marla, Please just listen." "I'm done listening," she said, yanking open the back door. "I'm done pretending we're friends when you obviously think I'm some kind of slob who ruins everything I touch." The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone on the porch with the sound of that dog still barking and my heart pounding in my chest. I sat there for what felt like hours, replaying every word I'd said, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. Had I said something that could be interpreted as body shaming? Had my tone been wrong? Had I somehow made her feel worse without realizing it? When I finally went back inside, Linda was loading the dishwasher. She looked up at me with concern. "Everything okay, honey?" Marla seemed upset when she left. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to explain what had really happened, to have someone on my side who understood that this wasn't about weight or body image or making anyone feel bad. But Marla was her daughter, and I was still just the girlfriend, even with a ring on my finger. "We had a misunderstanding," I said finally. "I'm sure we'll work it out." Linda nodded, but I could see the questions in her eyes. Mike found me a few minutes later, sitting at the kitchen table staring at nothing. "Carl said Marla was pretty upset when they left," he said, sitting down next to me. "What happened?" I told him everything. The dress, the conversation, the way she'd twisted my words into something cruel and hurtful. He listened without interrupting, his face getting more serious as the story went on. "I believe you," he said when I finished. "But you know how Marla gets when she's stressed. The fertility stuff has been really hard on her. Maybe give her some time to cool off, then try talking to her again." Time to cool off. I wondered how much time it would take for her to stop hearing things I hadn't said, stop feeling hurt by intentions I'd never had. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than a torn dress or a misunderstanding. This felt like the beginning of something that was going to change everything. I had no idea how right I was. The next morning, my phone started buzzing early. Text messages from Mike's cousin Jessica asking if I was okay and if the rumors she was hearing were true. A voicemail from Mike's Aunt Patricia saying she was disappointed in me and hoped I'd find it in my heart to apologize. An email from someone I barely knew, a friend of Marla's from college, telling me I should be ashamed of myself. Marla had been busy. By Tuesday morning, my phone had become a weapon of mass destruction, aimed directly at my sanity. It started with Jessica's text at 7 a.m. "Hey girl, heard about what happened with Marla. That's so messed up. Are you okay?" I stared at the message, coffee mug halfway to my lips, trying to process what she could possibly have heard. I'd told exactly 3 people what happened: Mike, my mom, and Sarah. None of them would have spread it around, especially not in a way that made it sound like I was the villain. But the messages kept coming. Mike's cousin Brad called during my lunch break at work, his voice stiff and formal. "Look, I don't know what your deal is with Marla, but making fun of someone's weight is pretty low, even for you." "Even for me?" I said, nearly choking on my sandwich. "Brad, what are you talking about? I never made fun of anyone's weight." "That's not what I heard," he said. "Marla's pretty upset. She said you humiliated her in front of everyone, called her fat, made her feel like garbage for trying on your dress. I felt like I was living in an alternate reality. She tried on my dress without asking and it got torn. That's what happened." I never said anything about her weight, but Brad had already made up his mind. "Whatever, just maybe think about how your words affect people, okay?" The line went dead, leaving me sitting in my car in the medical office parking lot, wondering if I was going crazy. Had I said something I didn't remember? Had my reaction been worse than I thought? I replayed that conversation on the porch over and over in my head, but I couldn't find the cruel words everyone seemed to think I'd said. Wednesday brought a Facebook message from Mike's Aunt Patricia, a woman I'd met exactly twice at family gatherings. "Dear Jennifer, I'm very disappointed to hear about your behavior toward Marla. Families should lift each other up, not tear each other down. I hope you'll find it in your heart to make this right." "Make what right?" I screenshot the message and sent it to Sarah, who called me immediately. "This is insane," she said. "What is she even talking about? And why is everyone suddenly an expert on what happened?" That's when I realized the scope of what I was dealing with. Marla hadn't just told a few people her version of events. She'd launched a full-scale campaign. I started getting friend requests from people I didn't know, relatives of relatives who'd somehow heard the story. Some of them sent messages along with their requests, ranging from disappointed to downright nasty. "People like you are what's wrong with society," wrote someone named Dave Morrison, who appeared to be Carl's brother. "Judging people based on their appearance instead of their character. Disgusting." An older woman named Helen, who I think was Linda's sister, sent a long message about how young people these days had no respect for others and how she was praying for my heart to soften. The worst part was how the story had evolved in the telling. In some versions, I'd apparently stood there laughing while Marla struggled with the dress. In others, I'd called her names and kicked her out of the house. One particularly creative retelling had me forcing her to try on the dress just so I could humiliate her. None of it was true, but truth didn't seem to matter. People wanted a villain, and I was perfectly cast for the role. The young, pretty bride who was mean to the struggling older sister. It was a story that practically wrote itself. Mike tried to stay neutral, but I could feel the pressure wearing on him. His mom called him every day, asking when I was going to apologize to Marla. His dad pulled him aside at work and told him that women get emotional about weddings, and maybe he should encourage me to make peace for the sake of family harmony. "They don't understand," Mike said one evening as we sat on his couch, my head on his shoulder. "They think this is just some silly argument between girls." "Then explain it to them," I said, exhaustion making my voice flat. "Tell them what really happened." "I have," he said, but something in his tone made me pull back to look at his face. "Have you really?" He sighed, running his hand through his hair. "I told them about the dress getting torn, but they think maybe you overreacted. They think maybe Marla's right that you made her feel bad about her size." There it was. Even Mike, who'd held me while I cried about my ruined dress, who'd seen the damage with his own eyes, was starting to doubt me. Not completely, but enough. Enough to think that maybe I was the problem. That night, I drove to my mom's house in my old neighborhood, just 20 minutes away, but feeling like a different world. Mom took one look at my face and put the kettle on for tea. "Tell me everything," she said, settling into her favorite armchair. So I did. I told her about finding Marla in my dress, about the rip that sounded like my heart breaking, about the conversation on the porch that had somehow been twisted into a hate crime. I told her about the messages, the accusations, the way everyone seemed to have an opinion about something they hadn't witnessed. When I finished, Mom was quiet for a long moment, staring into her teacup. "You know what this reminds me of?" she said finally. "When you were in middle school, and that girl Amanda spread rumors about you cheating on the math test. Remember how everyone believed her because her story was more dramatic than the truth?" I remembered. Amanda had been caught cheating and, to deflect attention from herself, had accused me of giving her the answers. It didn't matter that I'd been sitting 3 rows away and hadn't even finished the test myself. Her version was more interesting, so people chose to believe it. "Some people prefer drama to truth," Mom continued. "It makes them feel important to be part of something, even if that something is tearing another person down." "But these are supposed to be my family," I said, feeling tears start again. "These are people who are supposed to love me." "Honey," Mom said gently, "sometimes the people who are supposed to love us are the ones who hurt us the most. They think they know us well enough to fill in the blanks when they hear a story. They don't think they need to ask for our side because they assume they already know it." Driving home that night, I made a decision. I was tired of being the villain in someone else's story. If people wanted to hear the truth, they were going to get it. All of it. Even if it cost me relationships I thought I wanted to keep. Some fights are worth having, even when you're not sure you can win them. The decision to call a family meeting was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I spent 3 days crafting a group text to Mike's immediate family, rewriting it dozens of times to strike the right tone. Too aggressive, and I'd look like the villain they already thought I was. Too passive, and they'd dismiss me entirely. "I know there's been some confusion about what happened last weekend," I finally wrote. "I'd really appreciate the chance to share my side of the story with everyone. Would Sunday afternoon work for a family meeting at Bob and Linda's?" The responses trickled in slowly. Linda replied first with a simple, "Of course, honey." Bob sent back, "Sounds good." Danny just sent a thumbs up emoji. Marla's response came hours later, I don't see what there is to discuss, but fine. Those 5 days between sending the text and Sunday afternoon felt like the longest week of my life. I printed out screenshots of all my text messages with Marla from that night and the days following. I organized photos of my dress before and after the damage. I even wrote out a timeline of events, trying to be as objective as possible. Sarah came over Saturday night to help me prepare. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked, looking over my materials spread across the kitchen table. "This feels like a lot of pressure. I can't live with people thinking I'm someone I'm not," I said, highlighting a text where I'd apologized to Marla for any misunderstanding. "If I don't defend myself, who will?" Sunday arrived gray and drizzling, which felt appropriate for what I was about to do. Mike drove us to his parents' house in tense silence. I could tell he was nervous too, caught between supporting me and keeping peace with his family. Linda had set out coffee and store-bought cookies on the dining room table, the same table where we'd laughed just a week earlier. Everyone filed in looking uncomfortable. Marla arrived last with Carl, taking a seat as far from me as possible and immediately crossing her arms. I stood at the head of the table, my folder of evidence in front of me, and took a deep breath. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the back of the chair to steady myself. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice smaller than I'd intended. "I know this is awkward, but I need to clear the air about what happened last weekend." I started from the beginning, walking through every detail of that Saturday evening, finding Marla in my dress, the sound of the fabric tearing, the beads scattering across my floor. I showed them the photos of the damage, the split seams, the missing beadwork, the stained train. "This dress cost me $10,000, I said, passing the photos around the table. But more than that, it represented 2 years of saving, months of fittings, and all my dreams for my wedding day. Bob whistled low when he saw the photos. Linda's hand went to her mouth. Danny looked genuinely shocked. But Marla just stared at the table, her jaw set. Then I pulled out my phone and read aloud the text messages I'd sent Marla that night and the next day. Messages where I'd tried to be understanding, where I'd acknowledged that weddings can be emotional, where I'd repeatedly said this wasn't about her size or appearance. "I never once mentioned Marla's weight or appearance," I said, looking around the table. I was upset about my dress being damaged and about the invasion of privacy, but I tried to handle it gently, because I know fertility struggles have been hard on her and Carl. The room was dead silent. Linda shifted in her seat, looking uncomfortable. Carl was staring at his hands. Mike reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "I've been accused of body shaming, of humiliating Marla in front of everyone, of being cruel and superficial," I continued, my voice getting stronger. "But none of that happened. I have the messages to prove what I actually said." That's when Marla finally looked up, her eyes blazing. "So what? You want an apology? You want everyone to feel sorry for you because your precious dress got torn?" "I want people to know the truth," I said simply. "I want to stop being painted as a villain for having boundaries and expecting respect." Marla scoffed. "Respect? You made me feel like a freak. Maybe you didn't use those exact words, but your whole attitude—" "My attitude?" I interrupted, something snapping inside me. "My attitude when I found you in my bedroom, wearing my wedding dress without permission, after it was torn and ruined? It was an accident. Going into my room wasn't an accident. Putting on my dress wasn't an accident. And lying about what I said afterward definitely wasn't an accident." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marla's face went red, and she started to stand up. "I think," Linda said quietly, "we all need to take a step back here." But I wasn't done. 2 weeks of character assassination had built up inside me like steam in a pressure cooker. And now, the valve was finally open. "Do you know what it's been like?" I said, looking around the table. "Getting messages from people I barely know, telling me I'm a terrible person based on a story that isn't true. Having family members I thought cared about me decide I'm guilty without even asking for my side." Bob cleared his throat. "Jennifer, we didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," I said, tears starting to flow but my voice steady. "You all chose to believe the most dramatic version of events without questioning it. You chose to think the worst of me instead of the best." I wiped my eyes and took a shaky breath. I'm not perfect. Maybe I could have handled finding Marla in my dress better. Maybe I could have found different words. but I didn't deserve to be turned into a monster for being upset that something precious to me was destroyed. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't angry or tense. It was thoughtful. Uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Danny was the first to speak. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have asked you what happened instead of just believing what I heard." Linda nodded slowly. "You're right. We should have come to you first." Bob rubbed his face with both hands. "This got way out of hand. I'm sorry, kiddo." But Marla just sat there, arms still crossed, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "Marla?" Mike said gently. "Do you have anything you want to say?" She looked up at him, then at me, then back at the table. "I already said I was sorry about the dress," she muttered. "That's not what this is about anymore," I said. "This is about you telling people I said things I never said. About you turning a mistake into a campaign against my character." Her face crumpled slightly, and for a moment I thought she might actually apologize. But then, that hard look came back. "I told people how you made me feel," she said defensively. "I can't help how they reacted. You told them I body-shamed you. You told them I humiliated you in front of everyone. Neither of those things happened. That's how it felt to me." "Your feelings don't get to become my truth," I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "You don't get to rewrite history because you're embarrassed about what you did." Marla stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "Actually," Carl said quietly, speaking for the first time since we'd sat down, "maybe you do." Everyone turned to look at him. He was still staring at his hands, but his voice was clear. "I love you, Marla, but this has gone too far. Jennifer didn't do anything wrong, and you know it. You've been so angry about the fertility stuff that you're taking it out on everyone around you, especially her." Marla's mouth dropped open. "Carl." "No," he said, finally looking up. "I'm tired of walking on eggshells around your feelings. I'm tired of watching you hurt people because you're hurting. And I'm really tired of being married to someone who can't admit when she's wrong." The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Marla looked around the table, seeing no allies, no support for her version of events. "Fine," she said, her voice breaking. "Fine. You all think I'm this terrible person. Maybe I am." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, Carl following behind her with an apologetic look. As their car pulled out of the driveway, I sank back into my chair, emotionally drained but somehow lighter. I'd said everything I needed to say. The truth was out there now, naked and undeniable. The days following the family meeting felt like walking through a minefield. Some people, like Danny and Bob, went out of their way to be extra kind to me, as if they could make up for weeks of assumptions with a few thoughtful gestures. Danny texted me funny memes, and Bob started calling me kiddo more often, which I knew was his way of showing affection. Others, like Linda, seemed caught in the middle. I could tell she felt bad about not defending me sooner, but Marla was still her daughter, and the maternal instinct to protect ran deep. She'd hover around me at family gatherings, offering extra helpings of food, and asking repeatedly if I was comfortable, if I needed anything, if I was sure I was okay. It was sweet, but exhausting. Then there were the people who just disappeared. Cousins who stopped responding to my texts. Family friends who suddenly became very busy when I tried to make plans. I realized that some people preferred the drama of the original story, and my boring old truth wasn't nearly as entertaining. The hardest part was that Marla seemed to vanish completely. She stopped coming to family dinners, stopped showing up to the regular Sunday barbecues that had been a tradition for years. When I asked Mike about it, he'd just shrug and say she was working through some things. 3 weeks after the meeting, Carl showed up at our apartment alone. Mike was at work, and I almost didn't answer the door when I saw him through the peephole. We'd barely spoken since that Sunday, and I wasn't sure what to expect. "Can we talk?" he asked when I finally opened the door. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't been sleeping well. I made coffee while he sat at our kitchen table, fidgeting with his wedding ring. When I set the mug in front of him, he looked up at me with sad eyes. "She's not doing well," he said without preamble. "Marla, she's barely eating, barely talking to me. She keeps saying everyone hates her now." I felt a pang of something. Not quite guilt, but not satisfaction either. I never wanted to hurt her, Carl. I just wanted people to know what really happened. I know, he said quickly. And you were right to defend yourself. What she did, what she said about you afterward, it wasn't okay. I should have stopped it sooner. He took a sip of coffee and stared out our kitchen window at the apartment complex parking lot. The fertility stuff has been really hard on her. Harder than I think anyone realizes. She sees pregnant women everywhere, happy couples getting married, and it's like salt in a wound. When she saw your dress, that doesn't excuse what she did. No, it doesn't, he agreed. But maybe it explains it a little. I sat down across from him, trying to process what he was asking of me. What do you want me to do, Carl? Pretend it never happened? Let her off the hook because she's struggling? I don't know, he said honestly. I just know that she's my wife, and watching her fall apart is killing me. She won't go to counseling, won't talk to her mom, won't do anything except sit in our bedroom and cry. Part of me felt sorry for Marla. I really did. But another part of me, the part that had been dragged through the mud for weeks, wasn't ready to be the bigger person just yet. I'm sorry she's hurting, I said carefully, but I can't fix this for her. She needs to take responsibility for what she did. Carl nodded slowly. Yeah, I figured you'd say that. And you're probably right. He stood up, leaving his coffee mostly untouched. Thanks for listening anyway. After he left, I called Sarah and told her about the conversation. She was less sympathetic than I'd expected. Okay, so she's sad, Sarah said bluntly. Join the club. You were sad too when everyone was treating you like the villain. Did anyone care about your feelings then? That's kind of harsh. Is it? Look, I feel bad that she's struggling with fertility issues. That sucks, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But that doesn't give her a free pass to destroy other people. I knew Sarah was right, but it didn't make me feel any better. That evening, when Mike came home from work, I told him about Carl's visit. Maybe we should reach out to her, Mike said, settling next to me on the couch. Offer to talk things through. I stared at him. Are you serious? After everything she put me through, you want me to reach out to her? I'm just saying, maybe if you made the first move. Mike. I turned to face him fully. She lied about me. She told people I said things I never said. She tried to destroy my reputation because she was embarrassed about getting caught doing something wrong. And now you want me to apologize to her? Not apologize, just extend an olive branch. For the sake of family peace. There it was again. Family peace. The magic phrase that always seemed to mean I should sacrifice my dignity to make everyone else comfortable. What about my peace? I asked quietly. What about the fact that I've been walking on eggshells for weeks, trying not to upset anyone while they all decided I was a terrible person? When do I get to matter in this family? Mike looked uncomfortable. You matter. You know you matter to me. But not enough to expect your sister to treat me with basic respect. That's not fair, isn't it? I stood up, pacing to the window. Mike, if someone had treated your sister the way she treated me, would you be asking her to extend an olive branch? Or would you expect that person to apologize and make things right? He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, I could hear kids playing in the courtyard, their laughter echoing off the brick buildings. She's family, he said finally. So am I. Or, I'm supposed to be. That night, I lay awake thinking about what Carl had said, what Mike expected, what everyone seemed to want from me. They wanted me to be the bigger person, to smooth things over, to pretend that what happened was just a misunderstanding between women who got too emotional. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a violation of trust, followed by a deliberate campaign to damage my reputation. And I was tired of being the only one who seemed to think that mattered. The next morning, Mike's phone rang while we were having breakfast. It was his mom, and from his side of the conversation, I could tell it wasn't good news. What happened? I asked when he hung up. Marla's in the hospital, he said, already reaching for his keys. Carl found her passed out in their bathroom this morning. They think it's dehydration and exhaustion. My first instinct was worry. Whatever had happened between us, I didn't want Marla to be seriously hurt. But as we drove to the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to somehow become my fault too. At the hospital, the whole family was gathered in the waiting room. Linda was crying softly while Bob rubbed her shoulders. Danny looked scared and young, despite being 26 years old. Carl sat apart from everyone, staring at the floor. When Linda saw me, she immediately got up and hugged me. "Thank goodness you're here," she whispered. "She's been asking for you." I pulled back, confused. "Asking for me?" "She wants to talk to you. The doctor says she's okay, just run down and stressed. But she keeps saying she needs to talk to you." Mike squeezed my hand. "You don't have to if you're not ready." But I was curious despite myself. What could Marla possibly want to say to me now? Room 314 was quiet, except for the beeping of machines. Marla looked small in the hospital bed, her face pale without makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. When she saw me, she started crying. "I'm sorry," she said, before I'd even fully entered the room. "I'm so sorry, Jennifer. I ruined everything." I stood at the foot of her bed, unsure what to say. This wasn't the angry, defensive Marla I'd been dealing with for weeks. This was someone who looked broken. The dress, the lies, all of it. She continued through her tears. "I was so jealous of you, of your happiness, of how easy everything seemed for you. And when I put on that dress and felt beautiful for just a minute, and then it tore, I was so embarrassed I just lashed out." I pulled the visitor's chair closer to her bed and sat down. "Why didn't you just tell me that from the beginning?" "Because I was ashamed," she said simply. "Carl and I have been trying for a baby for 3 years. 3 years of shots and procedures and disappointment. And here you are, young and beautiful and getting married. And it felt so unfair." I felt something shift in my chest, a loosening of the anger I'd been carrying. "Marla, being jealous doesn't excuse lying about me to your family." "I know," she said quickly. "I know it doesn't. I wanted someone else to hurt as much as I was hurting. And that's terrible. And I'm sorry." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of weeks of conflict settling between us. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've probably ruined any chance of us being friends. I've definitely ruined your wedding planning. And I might have ruined my marriage too. Carl loves you. He's worried sick out there. He shouldn't have to deal with this version of me. The bitter, angry version who hurts people because she's hurt." I reached over and took her hand, surprising us both. "Then don't be that version anymore." She squeezed my fingers. "Can you forgive me? I know I don't deserve it, but we'll see," I said honestly. "This is going to take time, Marla. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight." She nodded, tears still flowing. "I understand. And Jennifer, your dress, I'll pay for whatever it costs to fix it, or replace it if it can't be fixed." As I walked back to the waiting room, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because the truth was finally out there, acknowledged by everyone who mattered. Mike stood up when he saw me coming, questions in his eyes. "She apologized," I said simply. "Really apologized." Linda burst into fresh tears, but these seemed like relief. Bob nodded approvingly. Danny gave me a thumbs up, but I wasn't done yet. There was still one more conversation I needed to have. "Mike," I said quietly, pulling him aside. "We need to talk about the wedding." The conversation with Mike about the wedding didn't happen until 3 days after Marla's hospital visit. We kept meaning to talk, but every time we started, something interrupted us. Work calls, family check-ins, or the simple exhaustion that comes after weeks of emotional upheaval. Finally, on Thursday evening, we drove to Lincoln Park and walked along the lakefront path. The late May air was warm, and Lake Michigan stretched out endlessly, dotted with sailboats enjoying the longer days. We found a bench overlooking the water and sat in comfortable silence for a while. "So," Mike said eventually, "what were you thinking about the wedding?" I'd been rehearsing this conversation in my head for days, but now that the moment was here, the words felt sticky in my throat. "I need to know that you're on my side," I said finally. "Not just now, when everything's resolved, but always, even when it's hard." He turned to look at me, confusion creasing his brow. "Of course I'm on your side. I love you. But you wanted me to be the one to reach out to Marla. You kept talking about family peace like my feelings didn't matter as much as everyone else's comfort." Mike was quiet for a long moment, watching a jogger pass by with her golden retriever. "You're right. he said finally. "I was trying to keep everyone happy, and I made you feel like you didn't matter. That's not okay. I need to know that when we're married, you'll have my back, even against your family if necessary. Especially against your family. I will," he said, taking my hand. "I promise. What Marla did was wrong, and I should have said that from the beginning instead of trying to play peacekeeper. I believed him, but I also knew that promises are easy to make and harder to keep when family pressure builds. There's something else," I said, "about Marla and the wedding." Mike tensed slightly. "What about her?" "I know she apologized, and I'm glad she did, but I don't want her there. Not as a bridesmaid, not as a guest. I can't have my wedding day overshadowed by worrying about her feelings or walking on eggshells." I expected him to argue, to say that excluding family was too extreme. Instead, he nodded slowly. "I talked to Carl yesterday," he said. "Marla's starting therapy, and she thinks it's best if she takes some time away from family events. She doesn't want to make things awkward for anyone." Relief flooded through me. "Really? Really?" She told Carl to tell us she hopes we have a beautiful wedding, and she'll be thinking of us. He squeezed my hand. "She also sent money to cover the dress repairs and asked Linda to give this to you." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Inside was a check for $1,500 and a handwritten note on simple white stationery. "Jennifer," it read in Marla's careful script, "I know money can't undo what I did, but I hope this helps with the dress or anything else for your wedding. You deserve a perfect day, and I'm sorry I almost ruined that for you. I hope someday we can be real sisters, not just family by marriage. Take care of my little brother. Love, Marla." I folded the letter carefully, emotions I couldn't quite name swirling in my chest. Forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't a light switch you could flip. It was more like a dimmer, slowly brightening over time. The dress itself had been a saga worthy of its own drama. Mrs. Chen, my seamstress, had taken one look at the damage and shaken her head gravely. "This is going to be challenging," she'd said in her precise English. "The beadwork, especially. Some of these are hand-sewn with thread that I might not be able to match." For 2 weeks, she worked on it like a surgeon, carefully reconstructing torn seams and replacing missing beads one by one. When I went for the final fitting, I barely recognized it as the same dress that had been crumpled on my bedroom floor. "You see," Mrs. Chen said, stepping back to admire her work. "Sometimes broken things become more beautiful when they're repaired. Like Japanese pottery. What do they call it?" "Kintsugi," I said, remembering an art class from college, where they fill the cracks with gold. "Yes, your dress has invisible gold now, stronger where it was broken." Standing in front of the fitting room mirror, I felt like the dress, and I had both been through something transformative. It looked exactly as it had before, elegant, timeless, perfect. But now it carried a story, not just of dreams and savings and careful planning, but of boundaries defended and dignity reclaimed. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect June days that makes Chicago summers worth enduring the brutal winters. I woke up in the hotel room I was sharing with Sarah and my mom, feeling calmer than I had in months. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Mom asked, bringing me coffee in bed like she used to when I was little and homesick from school. "Good," I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Really good. The getting ready process was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. Just me, Mom, Sarah, and Mike's cousin Jessica, who had become a surprising ally during the whole Marla situation. We laughed and told stories while the makeup artist worked, and I felt surrounded by people who truly loved me. When it was time to put on the dress, I held my breath as Sarah zipped it up. It fit perfectly, as if nothing had ever happened to it. But I knew better. Like Mrs. Chen had said, it was stronger now where it had been broken. The church ceremony was small, only about 50 people, which felt intimate rather than incomplete. As I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, he'd flown in from Phoenix where he'd moved after the divorce, I saw faces filled with genuine joy and love. No one was there out of obligation or family politics. Everyone in that church actually wanted to be there. Mike's face when he saw me was everything I'd dreamed of. His eyes filled with tears, and he mouthed "beautiful" as I approached the altar. In that moment, all the drama and pain of the past few months faded away. This was what mattered. the man I loved, promising to build a life with me. The reception was held at a small restaurant in Little Italy, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and wine bottles as centerpieces. We danced to At Last by Etta James, and I felt like Cinderella at the ball. Except this time I knew the magic wouldn't disappear at midnight. During the father-daughter dance, Dad held me close and said quietly, "I'm proud of how you handled everything, kiddo. Standing up for yourself isn't always easy, but it's always right." As the evening wound down, Linda pulled me aside near the dessert table. Her eyes were a little misty from champagne and emotion. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I should have stood up for you from the beginning. You're my daughter now, too, and I failed you." "You didn't fail me," I said, hugging her. "This whole thing was hard for everyone. Marla sent something for you," she said, reaching into her purse. "She made me promise to give it to you today." It was a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a small dove. The card read, "For peace and new beginnings." "Congratulations, sister." I fastened it around my wrist, where it caught the light from the restaurant's vintage chandeliers. It felt like a full-circle moment, the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Mike found me as I was saying goodbye to the last of our guests. "Ready to go, Mrs. Patterson?" he asked, using my new name for the first time. "More than ready," I said, taking his hand. As we drove to our hotel for our wedding night, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The savings and dreaming, the violation and betrayal, the lies and defense, the forgiveness and healing. It had been messy and painful and complicated, but it had also been real. 6 months later, I got a text from Marla with a photo of her and Carl at a fertility clinic. "Starting IVF," it read. "Scary but hopeful. Thinking of you both." I showed the text to Mike over breakfast. "Should I respond? What do you want to do?" I thought about it while I finished my coffee. The old me might have felt obligated to respond immediately, to smooth things over and pretend everything was fine. But I was different now, stronger in some fundamental way. "I'll send her good luck wishes," I said finally, "but on my timeline, not because I feel pressured to." That afternoon, I texted back, "Sending you both love and positive thoughts. Take care of yourselves." She responded with a simple heart emoji, and somehow that felt like exactly the right amount of connection for where we were in our relationship. The dress now hangs in our bedroom closet, carefully preserved in acid-free tissue paper. Sometimes I catch sight of it when I'm getting ready for work, and I remember that day, not just the wedding, but everything that came before it. The pain and the healing, the breaking and the mending, the moment I learned that standing up for yourself isn't always pretty, but it's always worth it. Mrs. Chen was right. Sometimes broken things do become more beautiful when they're repaired, and sometimes the invisible gold that fills the cracks is made of courage, truth, and the kind of self-respect that can't be bought or borrowed or torn apart by someone else's pain.